Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and radio here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, Southwick Community Programming Channel 15, and 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and our first guest this morning is the composer, David Sanford. He's on the faculty at Mount Holyoke College. We got to know each other many moons ago when I worked at WFCR, and he had a jazz orchestra called the Pittsburgh Collective, and they did a performance at Chapin Auditorium. He's got a new album out, and it's a big band. And David, it's so good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you too, Mark. Thank you.
I understand September 24th was the launch of your latest album. You've got a new group put together, and it's big band jazz, and you've used some of the area musicians that people know, like Tom Bergeron, who is a member of the Springfield Symphony, and others. So fill me in.
Yes, there's quite a few players with connections to this area. Ted Levine, who was on the faculty at Westfield State for many years and also teaches at 5 colleges. James Mondongo Messbauer, trombonist, who I've known for many years, who's out of Springfield, performs. He's actually the first trombone solo that you hear. The conga player backing him up, Theo Moore, is a longtime resident of this area, now lives in New York, but a graduate of UMass. Jeff Vidal from UMass is on the album, and I'm probably Anna Weber also is on it, who has just moved back to the area. So yeah, we have a lot of people with Valley connections.
And what kind of music did you compose for this? Is it covers of other people's stuff, or is it your music?
The majority of it is mine. The name of the album, A Prayer for Lester Bowie, is a piece by Hugh Reagan, who's one of the featured soloists, an outstanding trumpet player from Colorado, who has also been recently playing with the Art Ensemble Chicago and AACM. But otherwise, there's one arrangement that we do of mine of Dizzy Gillespie's Dizzy Atmosphere. The rest are original compositions of mine, which are probably, I guess if you had to say stylistically, they probably fall under jazz, but they lean towards other styles. There's certainly borrowings from classical. There's a lot of funk involved. There's some rock, and some of it's more traditional, and some of it's a little bit more out there.
How long did it take you to put the album together?
A long time. I would say the pieces have been, at least my contribution, the pieces have been written over the span of about between 2003 up through 2012. And then we recorded in 2016 over 2 days. And then it took me a long time. That's 20 different tracks. We were all in the same room. We did it in a bunch of takes, but then we had to balance it out so that, we got 20 different parts, 5 trombones, 5 trumpets, 5 saxophones, piano, bass, drums, percussion, guitar. You have to make sure that those are all audible, and certainly some songs you want to hear more of this and some songs you want to hear more of that. The soloist you want to stand out. So it took a long time to mix those down to a level that we were happy with. And it took a lot of money to do that because it takes time for the engineer to work, and he's living over in Italy now, but we were able to get it done.
And this is not your first album. You've done others under the Pittsburgh Collective and all that. So where can people get a hold of the album if they want to buy it or download it?
I think Bandcamp is the preferred venue by the label Greenleaf. I think if you go to Greenleaf Music's site, they'll actually have a link directly, I think, to Bandcamp, and they might have the best price on it. Otherwise, I think all the other sources, Spotify and Amazon and so forth. If you want to contact me, I'll send you one. I can send one directly too.
Yeah, I was just curious. David, how did you get into music? What prompted you to go into music? And I know you teach and I know you compose, but where did you start and how did you get to the place you're at now?
I think public schools. When I was in elementary school in Pittsburgh, my brother started playing trombone, and I can't say it was a great music program, but he started playing trombone. I started trying to play trumpet, couldn't get a sound out of it. They moved me to euphonium, that broke, so he moved me to trombone, and we ended up both playing the same instrument. And I didn't take it that seriously there. When I was in sixth grade, we had an outstanding director in the junior high there. My brother said, "Come listen to us play my big band rehearse," and this was the group that he was playing in. The director, who just passed away last year, was a man named William McMosley, and I attended a rehearsal where they used to practice in the school cafeteria, and it was a full big band with 4 trumpets, 4 trombones, 5 saxes, and I'd never heard anything like that close, and that was kind of those life-changing events. I think before that I wanted to be a professional basketball player, and I think after that my interest became really jazz and big band jazz and music in general. So yeah, I kind of go back to there, and then I just various activities like concert band and orchestras and marching band all just kind of kept me even more inspired.
Who are some of the jazz composers that influenced you as you were starting out, and who you think about today when you write?
I think Mingus was sort of my first superhero, back when, we used to always say, okay, who's your favorite this and that, and before that it was the Isley Brothers and the Temptations. And after that it was Dizzy Gillespie and Charles Mingus. Once I think our school, not the school, but specifically it was a local community college that had a jazz radio program where we heard Mingus the first time. And I was really impressed by that. I, wanted to hear more of his music. So I went out and, with my little bit of money that I could spare every month, I would go out and buy more albums by Charles Mingus and, more albums by Dizzy Gillespie. And, then Woody Herman, I started liking, I think by the time I was in middle school. Toshiko Akiyashi was very big back in the 70s. She had a big band that played, and she would kind of bring in these, East Asian ideas, from her Japanese heritage. And so I was really a big fan of hers at that time. Don Sebesky had this big, huge piece for orchestra with jazz combo called Bird and Bella in B flat. And that might have been the first real third stream piece, combining classical and jazz that I'd ever heard. And that was kind of one of those life-changing things. So, and, I think Mingus all through those years, I think, those were kind of the guys, and, I still go back to those albums and love all of them.
Yeah, now you've got quite the catalog of music that you've composed, and I know that your band plays them. Do other musicians and orchestras play David Sanford's music?
Lots of other musicians play. I get commissions for, classical pieces, which is one of the reasons I don't write as much. I mean, if I've left to my own devices, I would write big band all the time. But I have plenty of ensembles who have been commissioning me over the years, most notably the Meridian Arts Ensemble, which is a brass quintet, who I just finished a piece for, maybe 2 weeks ago. And a lot of those players have been the core of the big band. But Matt Heimovitz, as you may know, who played with the big band here about 15 years ago, sponsored by WFCR. I was very thankful. So actually, sorry, that's not the same station. Never mind.
Yeah, but when we both met and did some projects together, we were at WFCR. It's now New England Public Media. Okay.
Yeah, Matt's been great. I've done a lot of work with him and a lot of writing for him over the years. And there's a flutist named Jennifer Grimm, who I'm writing a piece for now, who's in a group called the Zephyros Winds. And I wrote a piece for them about 3-4 years ago, and she's going to record some other music of mine this year. So she's been really great. And I've written a lot of music for those people. Boston Modern Orchestra Project did several pieces of mine in the last 4 or 5 years, which they recorded recently, and which was really wonderful for them. So yeah, I was always, there hasn't been any shortage of music writing for other people. I think but yeah, as far as big bands, not many people have played my big band music, and I suppose it would be wonderful to hear it more, but I do kind of like leading it myself. I kind of like playing it with the musicians that I have and so forth. So I haven't really pushed it out there. It's difficult music. And I don't know that it's necessarily to everybody's taste. I think the people in my band love playing it and I love presenting it, but yeah.
Yeah. When you see or hear your pieces performed by your own band or by others, do you have a favorite child among your music compositions that you go, "Wow, that's my favorite," or are they all the people? Like playwrights to say, all my plays are all my children, and I love them equally. But do you have one or two that you've written that are your personal favorites?
Um, I can't say that necessarily there's one in particular. I think the ones that get played the least are kind of the ones that I want to hear more. But I would also say every piece, when it's played by a different person, you get a different kind of a rendering with it. So, certainly get different balances with the larger works. So you get excited about any of the orchestra pieces getting performed. And then, but also I would also say sometimes you get that perfect performance and it's hard to get that out of your head such that, it makes it hard for anybody else to play that piece. And you're kind of thinking, oh, wow, I wish, Blank's performance, were, which sounds awful. I mean, I'm thankful for anyone that plays any of my music and certainly anybody who performs it, programs it, and listens to it. So, but yeah, I can't say that there's any single favorites of mine. I will say that, there are certainly ones that we do that, I probably have a soft spot for Fenwick with the big band in part because it's kind of up to the tenor player to carry the foreground. And that's really the first piece of music that, my big band ever played back in 2003. So that's kind of a sentimental favorite, I think.
Yeah. And the pandemic shut everybody down, but you as a composer obviously could work during the pandemic because you can sit at a keyboard by yourself or however it is that you compose. And I know that you're on the faculty at Mount Holyoke College and you were the chairman of the music department for a while. Were you able to teach during the pandemic? And I would assume that teaching music remotely is far more difficult than teaching math or science or literature, something like that.
I did teach remotely when the first months back in 2020, I was on leave, so I sort of lucked out on having to do that. My colleagues had to pick up, the Zoom technology on the fly, much more so than I had to. I mean, by the time I started, it was fall of 2020, so I was kind of following their lead and learning things as they went. Also, I haven't taught any theory since the pandemic. So my remote teaching last year didn't involve the hands-on playing the keyboard and sight singing and, all those skills that we have to work on in the classroom. So that would have fallen to Larry Shapul. He had to kind of take all, and Tian Hui both of them had to really pick up, that information. So, but yeah, I taught this year, similar. So far, I haven't had to teach any theory, but yeah, mostly, oh my gosh. I did have to learn with Zoom to present a lot of videos, present a lot of information, doing testing online and so forth, all those information. But otherwise, it's just the lectures online were actually fairly easy. I think one of the things that actually helped is, I think many people wouldn't want to admit it, but via Zoom, we could see the names of the students. So in a class with more than 10 people, you could memorize who the people were very quickly. Now in the classroom with masks on, it's 10 times harder.
Yeah. And actually the music department at Mount Holyoke, man, was lucky enough to do some work with the big broadcasts that your colleague Mark Gianfrido does. And they were one of the big broadcast of 2020 happened days before everything shut down. And they were able to pivot to a virtual one in 2021, which, although it wasn't the same as sitting in Chapin Auditorium and it didn't have the theatricality that you would see in a broadcast like that from Chapin, it certainly worked in a virtual level. And the people in that music department and those students kept on singing even if it was online.
They've done a great job in making the pivot to the technology. Rachel Feldman, the choral conductor, did an outstanding job with presenting the Vespers program last holiday season. Tien came up with the virtual Uh, hmm, Darn it, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah.
Monsters Ball was kind of I think, what did they call it? It was kind of a haunt. It was a sort of a virtual haunt of sorts that he was doing, a virtual haunted house. So, they were able to put that together last fall. And yeah, I think, whatever the technology and the safety, health service allows, what the CDC allows, they've been able to kind of work with that and make music happen. And I think, the students, obviously, they have been missing a lot of the real, hands-on in-person meetings and so forth. But I think, last year we were able to make, my composition class, actually last year, we were able to put together several performances just, of the virtual variety where you're getting, 4 or 5 different parts and then stitching them together, thanks to the faculty. Bob Eisenstein was very instrumental in helping, no pun intended, in helping us get several string quartets and vocal ensembles together. So, yeah, we've been able to stay afloat, I think, through all this.
We're talking with the composer David Sanford, and we're going to talk more with David after we take a break to acknowledge underwriters that make programming like Artsbeat possible. David, before we go to break, do you have a website or a place where people can go to learn more about you and maybe catch a snippet or two of some of the music that you've done?
We are about to launch a website, which we've been trying to put together for a while, davidsanford.org, and that will have all the information about the big band, plus all the other recordings that I've been involved in and any background on myself and the band. That should be up, I think, by this weekend. So otherwise, through David Sanford at Mount Holyoke College, on the Mount Holyoke College website through the music department, I think that's where I think my email address is, and most of the information, the basic information about me is there.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back and chat more with David Sanford. And just so you know, at the end of Artsbeat today, at the end of the hour, we're going to play one of David's musical pieces that he sent along. He says he doesn't have favorites, but I said, can you send me 3 pieces if you'd like me to play one of the 3, but they have to be no longer than 3 minutes in length. So he does have favorites. You'll get to hear them at the end of the hour. We'll be back after these announcements, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley, with convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut. Visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for community radio on WSKB provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every 4th Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. We're chatting with the composer David Sanford, who has a brand new album coming out, or actually it arrived on September 24th. And David not only composes prolifically for his own band and for other musicians, but he's also on the faculty of Mount Holyoke College, where he teaches music and has at times chaired the music department, which is one of the better music programs here among the colleges. They have some good classical programming, some great jazz, and all of that. David, have any of the alums of Mount Holyoke gone on to fame and fortune, so to speak?
Yeah, well, Michelle Brooks Thompson, you may have heard quite a bit. She was on The Voice many years ago, and I think at least one other of those kind of talent competition shows. But she's a very impressive gospel singer who's done national anthems at a lot of sporting events, and I think she's got several recordings out. But she was outstanding when she was with us, and we've always been fans of hers. We have several students, Cassandra Hartford and Catherine Kaiser, who I think both teach at Penn State in the musicology departments there. There's quite a few who go back. Mara Bondi, the soprano, the daughter of Alan Bondi, former faculty, has an outstanding career as a soprano. Nancy Gustafson, I would say more recently, Caitlin Jean, who was a singer and bassist, has done a lot of indie albums.
She performed. She came back to perform with the Big Broadcast.
Yes, she's outstanding. Yeah, one of our recent graduates, Eva Snyder, has, I think, at least an EP out and has been working in Nashville. She was working for YouTube for a while out, and she was a music and computer science graduate who did some really outstanding work in, the computer field, but which kind of has funded her music career. And she's worked very hard, I think, in getting, I think she put quite a few videos out and was able to move to Nashville after, I don't know if she's still working with YouTube or just, I have no idea how that particular business works, but she's able to move to Nashville and, be around songwriters and musicians who she's worked with before there. So she's done very well as well.
I know you compose for big band and for jazz, and you've composed for the cellist Matt Heimovitz. Do you ever get to do any film scores, or do you do any kind of video types of things? Or are you more composing for concert?
I'm pretty much only about concert music, in those forms. I would love to do film scores because I love film, but I don't have any experience in that area, and kind of perfectly happy just watching and hearing other people's work.
Yeah. A question that somebody asked me to ask you: when you are commissioned to write a piece of music, basically that means that a performer says to you, David, I'd like you to write a piece of music for my orchestra or for me as a soloist or things like that. Do they set the parameters? Or is there somebody say, David, I want a 12-minute piece for one musician or this or that? And when you're commissioned, how long do you have to write the piece of music that you write?
I think usually you make those agreements up front. BMOP was very good. Boston Modern Orchestra Project, they gave me a few parameters, specifically the piece I wrote for them, Black Noise, which was 2017. It originally started with kind of being a chamber ensemble, a chamber music piece, and it grew to a much larger orchestra. They made other things available, specifically trombones. I think I wanted, maybe more winds. They said saxophones were available, which is something I was very excited about. So, we kind of made some changes as we went with that one. But that was a piece they asked for back in, I think, 2012. And, I started working on it maybe in 2013. And, obviously they had to make room for their program to do it. But I really kind of took my time with it, in part because I had other things coming to him that I had to do and so forth. But there have been other cases where somebody says, oh, we have a piece and we have a concert specifically here and we need it for that time. I probably would have, all performances had happened in 2020, I would have had a difficult time getting all the music done that I had been asked to write. But things got spread out and slowed down. People weren't putting on, performances, concerts that were supposed to happen, didn't happen. So it gave me more time to write them. But, usually there's kind of a specific event that the piece is meant for, and I have to keep that deadline in mind.
And when you write a piece of music, do you write the melody and score it for the various instruments, or does somebody else come in and do the instrumentations for the piece of music that you compose?
I do 100% of my work. I know film composers, I'm told Danny Elfman has a recording of him playing it on piano and singing it, and then he passes it on to, I know one of his orchestrators is a guitarist named Steve Bartek, who used to be in Oingo Boingo with him, and I know he does all of Danny Elfman's work. I do all my orchestrations, and then, and every piece is different. I mean, there's some pieces where you start with a melody and then you harmonize that, and then you figure out other melodies, and you kind of evolve that. You take motifs and develop those. There are pieces like that. There are other pieces where you're thinking, okay, I want this harmony, I want this particular chord progression, and you figure out what melody works best with that. And then there are plenty of pieces where I'm just kind of thinking of an atmosphere, and then I'm kind of filling in as I go. So, I think it depends on the piece. I have different inspirations every time.
And when you are commissioned to write something, like you had again mentioned Matt Heimovitz, and you wrote this piece of music for him, can other people besides him perform it, or when it's a commission, does it belong to him?
I think most commissions, the commissioner has exclusive rights for a particular period. Usually there's a contract involved, and it will say for maybe the first 2 years, nobody else can perform it without the permission of the person who commissioned it. And then, after it's over, after, that particular time, anybody can play it. So, usually that's, worked out in a contract in advance.
Where did you find your music to listen to and watch during the pandemic? Were you one of these folks that found it on YouTube and streaming, or did you go to your record collection?
A little bit of both. I have, you can't see behind me, but there's a huge stack of CDs and albums that I've bought over the years that I kind of listen to as I get to them. Some of them are gifts that people give me. Some of them are ones that I'm just curious about. But invariably, I sort of work my way very slowly through that. And, but I will say it's easier to go to YouTube, and, obviously the sound isn't great, but if you're just specifically looking up something out of the blue, it's very easy to find things there, and very good performances of pieces, a lot of times with the score attached to it. So, I've fallen into that trap where, I try to purchase music, if it's music I know that I want to hear it, just to help out artists and so forth. I'm still buying CDs, unlike a lot of other people, I would say generally I will buy the CD if it's available. Particularly it's, as a kind of a completist, I want to hear the whole album in the order, and I want to see the liner notes and the personnel and so forth.
Yeah. So, David, once again, where can people catch a snippet of your new work? And when your website's ready, what's the web address where people can learn more about David Sanford?
I think the web address would be David Sanford, DavidSanford.org. I think that's what I've searched it under, and as of right now, it's still under construction. But again, it should be up very soon. I'm not sure how much. We'll have links to the actual recordings themselves. You can find a lot of the information on YouTube. I know somebody put together. I think I've seen Spotify channels of David Sanford, which I think are putting together by algorithms. I don't think. I'm not sure who puts those together or what puts those together. I haven't done it myself. So, but I know
I guess people have to go to davidsanford.org and wait for that website to arrive, or just Google David Sanford.
That works. Yes.
Yeah. We've been chatting with David Sanford from Mount Holyoke College, and it's been a pleasure having you here, David. I always enjoy chatting with you. We're going to take another break to acknowledge the underwriters who make programming possible here on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15, Southwick Community Programming Channel 15, and 89.5 FM WSKB. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, and we'll return shortly.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield. Underwriting for Community Radio on WSKB is brought to you in part by Rockies. Over 30 convenient locations throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Florida. One of the nation's largest Ace dealers. Expertise and great product selection in paint, hardware, lawn and garden. That's Rockies. Rock solid service since 1926. On the web at rockies.com.
Join us every Thursday morning
from 6 until at least 7:30.
Check out the Bobby G and Company Show
right here on WSKB 89.5
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. And we're headed up to the University of Massachusetts and the Fine Arts Center with Jamilla, Deria, and Michael Sakamoto, who are the two people responsible for putting a variety of music, theater, and dance on the stage of the Fine Arts Center and some of the smaller performance venues there, and are also involved in some of the other programming that has made the Fine Arts Center and a magnet of places to go see and hear lots of performing arts and visual arts in the area. Something of note, the Fine Arts Center has probably the largest stage of theaters in the Pioneer Valley, and at one point in time when it first opened, it was the only place that a big touring Broadway show could play. And some of the major dance companies, the big ones like the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, have performed there, along with popular artists like Alan Cumming and Storm Large. There was a touring production of Cabaret. The Fine Arts Center is known for its jazz programming. It's known for its classical music, chamber music programming. It's got children's programming. In fact, it's got a lot. And these are the two people that put it together. So good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you today. And thank you for that lovely introduction.
Well, I'm a fan of the Fine Arts Center, and I've been, over the years, have been there multiple times for performances. And, I think that your program, I don't know how the two of you can put the programming together because there's so much and it's so diverse. And it's like you're two chefs working with a variety of product that's really good, but you have to please all these discriminating palettes of taste, where this one is like, I'm a vegan classical music lover, and this one only wants this form of ethnic food, and so forth. How do you guys do it?
Well, thank you again. You're so generous. And I will say, the Fine Arts Center is certainly a leading presenter of performances, leading national presenter of performances, but we also are a multidisciplinary, multi-arts presenter. So we also have the Museum of Contemporary Art under our auspices, as well as the Hamden Gallery and Augusta Savage Gallery. But in terms of our performances, though, Michael Sakamoto, our performing arts curator, really is masterful at taking the charge and actually carrying this legacy of inclusive programming forward. So for 46 years, the Fine Arts Center really has dug into this value of inclusive programming, where we not only, present the top artistic leaders of Western art forms, but also of equally giving space and time to non-Western artists and art forms. And I think that that legacy is housed and really carried forward in Michael's vision.
I know that the pandemic shut you down along with every other performing and visual arts organization around the country. As you're putting together a season this year, you must have been at the whim of the other arts organizations getting back on track, because you book dance companies and chamber music ensembles and other things in the hopes that they would all be back and rehearsed and performing and all of that. Did programming during the pandemic for this season present more of a challenge logistically than what you might have put on stage a year ago or 2 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole world is still, as we all know, we're all too familiar worldwide. We're all still trying to get back on our feet, and that goes as much for artists and presenters and funders and agents and the entire arts and culture community. So what we had to do was to really stay. Same thing we had to do last year in the height of the pandemic, where everything went virtual, which is stay in constant contact and really have discussion and dialogue with our colleagues in that kind of interdependent way, where you realize you can't do it without each other. You survive on each other, you depend on each other for each other's survival. So artists are slowly getting back to touring. This fall, there's a lot of mini tours. There's a lot of one-off, run out kind of performances. And so we had a lot of dialogue about like who was available for that. And also knowing that audiences, we can't assume and take them for granted either. People are economically still challenged. People are still fearful because everybody's, what I always say, everybody's still Delta cautious,
right?
And has to. So, starting things a little bit smaller scale. So, for example, our performing arts season, in-person season, opening with Bill T. Jones, Arnie Zane Company, America's premier dance theater company. Normally, they do these gigantic, huge main stage spectacles. We're having them do a very intimate show called Afterwardsness, which is based on a Sigmund Freud concept of like that after effects of trauma and crisis that we're all going through. And it's their take on that. And it's a very intimate show for only, I think about 169 seats at a time per show. And that was something we wanted to do for the community as well, because we're trying to meet not only the artists where they're at, but the community and our audience where they're at too. And by spring, we're hoping, we're doing a few more larger shows, but still a mix of like small, medium, and large. So we're trying to slowly, gradually move people back in. And of course, we're opening with our virtual season next week on Tuesday with Kronos Quartet, America's premier classical new music string quartet. And that's a way of, bringing people in slowly.
Yeah, and I noticed that by the end of the season, in the spring, then you have Alvin Ailey, which is huge in terms of what they're doing. So the scope of what's on stage gets larger and larger. Both of you came into a fine arts center with quite the legacy of performance and visual arts. I mean, Fred Tillis was the head of the Fine Arts Center at one point, and the Fine Arts Center developed a rich repertoire, but also a good reputation in the community. What brought the two of you to the Fine Arts Center? Because you both came to Amherst and UMass with great backgrounds. What attracted you to the Fine Arts Center? Jamilla, you get to go first.
Okay, and I love that question, so thank you for that one. I was, born and raised in Hartford, Connecticut, so not very far from the Pioneer Valley, and then went to school in Western Massachusetts. And in fact, I spent summers at New World Theater and Co-Festival and really got a lot of early training there. And that's where I saw some fantastic artists for the first time. Sekou Sundiata, Universes, Mark Bamuti Joseph. It really exposed me to artists who are not only at the top of their field in very intimate venues, but also really opened me up to the arts administration field. And so in many ways, I got my start at the Fine Arts Center, because New World was one of the premier programs under its auspices. And so when I heard about this opportunity, and my family at that time was growing, and it was maybe time to leave New York and get a backyard, I was just like, it'd be great to go back to where I started.
And it's certainly changed in the time that you left and came back. I mean, some things are the same, but the diversity of the programming and the amount of things and the opportunities have certainly grown in the last couple of decades at the Fine Arts Center.
Absolutely. I think what's amazing about our legacy is that we really stay in the times. We've had a history of really progressive curators who really understood that what needed to happen was that we needed to be a platform where we connected the community with the artists of the day to talk about and present work that really, reflected, the times. And I think you saw that during the pandemic when we presented Breathing While Black, which was our juried exhibition where we had a call to artists to really talk about their reflections on the George Floyd murder. Then we had a special premiere of Wynton Marsalis's Democracy Suite right in the midst of the election sort of cycle. And he was sort of talking about, through his work, jazz as a tool of liberation. And we also saw that through Silk Road, led by Rhiannon Giddens, which was our culminating event for our last season, where we had artists who were in different locations performing in real time with each other and exploring how we can find connection across fault lines. So yes, we continue to change, and we will continue to change as we as a society and a people and a culture change.
Yeah. Michael, what brought you to the Fine Arts Center?
Well, a similar story. I didn't grow up in this part of the country. I'm originally from Los Angeles, where I lived the majority of my life. But I was actually presented here as an artist. I'm also a performing artist back in 2012 by one of my programmer predecessors, Ranjana Devi, who's the founder and longtime director of the Asian Arts and Culture program, which is one of the programs I inherited when I was hired. And that, that program is one of the only ones in the entire country that is specifically dedicated to Asian and now Asian American explicitly arts and cultural programming. And that, for me as an Asian American, a fourth generation Japanese American, and a performance artist, this is really important legacy stuff, and something that I feel that as a career person in the arts, I could dedicate a good chunk of my life to, and my life energy. Also, simply because of the diversity that Jamilla's talking about, where diversity is not simply a catchphrase or a watchword. It's very much about actual, not just diversity, but actual cultural difference. And how do we live together? How do we breathe together? How do we create together? And how do we dialogue and understand and communicate? The Fine Arts Center's programming for decades has clearly walk that talk, and predecessors such as Dr. Tillis, and of course with New World Theater, Roberta Uno, who is really a national treasure and has now moved back here, lives here again in our midst, which is really a wonderful thing. This was a way that I felt that I could trust in coming here and moving my family here, where this could be a kind of new artist and arts administrator and curatorial and scholarly home as well, because we're in an R1 university as well.
You guys are both dedicated in programming and in presentation to diversity and opening up, giving the community at large an opportunity to hear different points of view and different voices. Is it a challenge to get those different communities into the Fine Arts Center to see performance when many of these different communities have never had the opportunity, A, to go to the theater, and B, to see their visions and their voices being represented on the stage? You're putting stuff up there. How do you get them to feel comfortable about going to the theater for the first time?
I'll kick this off, and certainly Michael jump in. I think, we're reopening after being closed for a year and a half. So I think that in many ways we're that welcoming process that we're going to have, that we're doing with communities that don't traditionally come into the Fine Arts Center. I think we're doing that with everybody. I think that we're out having conversations with stakeholders, with community partners about what our community needs. And in many ways, we're opening up even some of our curatorial process to be more inclusive by inviting faculty members and students and even community members to offer their points of view on the work that they see on our stages. I think that, and you mentioned this, that we built this season almost in sort of crescendo style, where we're starting off with these smaller, more intimate performances, and then we're building out to, our final performance with Alvin Ailey. And I think that sort of slow transition back will be in that process. We'll be looking to not only engage our loyalists who've been with us for the last 46 years, but also, last season through our pandemic period, that our 2021 season, we engaged with almost 26,000 people. 70% of them were brand new to the Fine Arts Center through our digital programming. Anecdotally, we know that they were a bit more diverse. The age range and who witnessed our work was much broader. The educational background was much broader. So we know that the silver lining of the pandemic was that it broke down the walls a bit more for our theater, and what we are looking to do now and going forward is to really keep that conversation going and keep that relationship going with the new communities that we encountered last year.
That's great. We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge the underwriters that make programming like Artsbeat possible. But before we do, a couple of things to make note. The programs and services of the Fine Arts Center at the University of Massachusetts are available to everybody in the community. You don't have to be a part of the UMass community to go. And when you do go to the Fine Arts Center, it is very accessible. There's lots of parking on the UMass campus, particularly for the evening shows after 5 o'clock when a lot of the commuting students have gone. So that is a point. And the second thing is it's got a very easy to find website, fineartscenter.com. I don't know who grabbed that name at the beginning, but you don't have to go through a lot of slashes and EDUs and everything else to find it. So while we take this break, go check out some of the programming there, not only on the Fine Arts Center series, but some of the other series and programs and some of the galleries. And there's something year-round happening all the time at the Fine Arts Center. We're talking with Jamilla, Deria, and Michael Sakamoto from the UMass Fine Arts Center. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and we'll return shortly.
Underwriting is brought to you by Boise Cascade Distribution, providing products and services needed for building material dealers, home improvement centers, and industrial customers. They offer everything from engineered wood and plywood to Drex decking and railing, James Hardie siding, and Advantech subfloor. Located at 33 Fowler Street Extension in Westfield and on the web at bc.com, they are committed to providing quality products, great service, convenience, and value.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield. Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
I'm Mark Auerbach. Join me every Friday at 8 a.m. for Artsbeat, where you'll meet interesting actors, directors, designers, and musicians here in Western New England.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're at the Fine Arts Center at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst with Jamilla, Deria, and Michael Sakamoto to be chatting about what's coming up at the Fine Arts Center and its many programs and services. And again, thank you both for joining me today. We've been talking about diversity and of programming, not only in the origins of where the programming's coming from, but also in the performance types. So what are some of the programs up and coming this season that you are most looking forward to presenting?
Well, to answer that, and also to respond to your previous question about, really serving our multitude of constituencies and those communities that may not always see themselves here. For me, a big part of the curating mission is about intersectionality. So how can we both serve our traditional audiences and serve the general mission of a university-based performing arts center, bringing world-class and high-level artists in every genre, every style, every art form, music, dance, and theater that we can. At the same time, giving people an opportunity to see themselves on stage, in a room, on a camera. So 2 quick examples of things I'm looking forward to answer your second question. So Jennifer Coe is one of our first in-person artists that we're presenting this season. World-class classical music violinist, plays Bach, Beethoven, with the best of them. And she's also very dedicated to commissioning new work for contemporary classical music composers and musicians that play them, as well as being very active and activist in her stance very publicly, which you see in the New York Times, which you see in her TV spots about the struggles of Asian Americans in America today. And so her Bach and Beyond program, where she's playing Bach masterworks in the first half and new commissions that she made happen in the height of the pandemic, no less, from various Asian American composers, some of whom are very famous, like Vijay Iyer, and some of whom are less known, like Anjana Swaminathan, who does amazing work in a South Indian Carnatic tradition. Other shows like Martha Redbone, the amazing soul, funk, folk music artist who's Native American and African American, who gives us an opportunity to not only have a really fun and funky time in the space, but also to bring together both the Native American and African American communities on and off campus. Also, someone like Emily Johnson, who's a contemporary dance artist, who is one of the first artists in a while that we're really having in a development residency. She's both teaching a course for Amherst College in a partnership with 5 colleges, as well as being in residence in Bowker Auditorium, our mid-sized theater, for a whole week in February, in which culminating in a free showing of her work in progress performance of her new multi-year project, which again is really dedicated to creating dialogue around Native American and Indigenous issues in the arts, in American society, in North America, in Turtle Island, and also, to create this public dialogue around what does it actually mean to decolonize institutions. And then, of course, moving towards the end of the season, things like not only Ailey, which you mentioned, but Small Island Big Song, which is our 3rd year in a row of our wonderful, beautiful new partnership with the School of Earth and Sustainability, which is a world-class department at UMass, and we're also the top flight MFA creative writing program. This is a project that started 2 years ago with Philip Glass, continued last year with intermediate artist Mila Matreyek, and now with Small Island Big Song. 8 artists from across the Pacific and Indian Oceans, all of their countries of which are under threat from rising seas and climate crisis. So this is a way, again, to, not simply to entertain people, but to give them a beautiful human experience at the same time, prompt them into really understanding their place in the world, and to leave the theater with some questions. that can improve their own lives as well.
Yeah.
So.
Jamilla, do you have one or two things that are up and coming that are special to you? I know that it's a question when somebody's producing and presenting, they go, but they're all my children and I love everything that we're putting on the thing. But you've got to have one or two that you're really ramped up about. And you're muted.
So no, I'm excited about quite a lot, but what I also am looking forward to is, my son is now getting to be a little bit of the age where I can start to bring him to shows. So I'm excited about our family program. So Airplay that's coming in the fall, and then Nubuntu coming in February. Our rich lineup of family programs, I think, are going to be a nice way for families who've been sort of locked in their houses together for 18 months to come out and see top quality international art together with their friends and family across the valley. So I'm excited about our family offerings, and of course, I'm excited to see Alvin Ailey, Bill T. Jones, who he himself, we believe, will be coming up in that intimate venue, and it's thrilling to be able to open up the season with a really special program. That's honestly, you talked about touring at the top of this, Mark, but this is really just coming up. We're doing the Massachusetts premiere, and then they're going to do one other stop, and then they're going back to New York. So this is a really special, unique opportunity, and I really am thrilled that we're opening up our in-person programming with Bill T's project afterward there.
We got to remind people, check out the programming at the website, which is fineartscenter.com. And tickets are available for these programs, information, backgrounders, all kinds of good information there. So make it a resource for yourself to be sure that you get to Amherst for one or more programs this year. As programmers, you guys have to look to see what's out there now that's going to be the next big thing or the next exciting thing. And during the pandemic, you couldn't be circling the globe or going to the conferences in New York that all of your fellow administrators go to. So how have you been able to find what is available for 22, 23, 24? Because I understand that some of these things have to be booked years in advance. How far out, Jamilla and Michael, can you find something you want to put on the stage and schedule it?
So I'll jump off and then I'll hand it off to Michael. So one beautiful outcome of the pandemic is that the field became much closer. There's regular communication now happening with large groups of presenters and artist managers and even artists. Because we can't go from gig to gig to gig to scout new talent and new projects, we've just been talking to each other a lot more, which is fantastic. It's really helped to beat back this feeling of a little, being isolated in this moment when the arts field kind of went a little quiet because of all these necessary health restrictions. So I know in that way, that's been a great way for us to keep on top of what's happening. But I know that Michael, who's really leading the charge, can speak more fully to this.
Yeah, and Mike, I couldn't. We only have a couple of seconds, so.
Yep. Yeah, basically, long story short, like Jamilla's saying, we all are backing each other up as much as possible, and we all have conversations as much about each other as human beings, like never before. So artists, agents, producers, we stay in very, very close touch, and we ask each other how we're doing on a human level, and that engenders trust. So people are coming to each other much more often, frankly, than they were before. So we're all we're all holding each other up, and that's how we're going to get through and get through it all together.
Thank you both, Jamilla Deria and Michael Sakamoto from the University of Massachusetts Fine Arts Center, for joining us. fineartscenter.com. I hope you guys will come back during the course of the year, because you got so much. We have so much we can chat about, and maybe we can bring our show up to the Fine Arts Center one day and broadcast from there. Thanks for joining us. This wraps up another Artsbeat. We end today with David Sanford's arrangement of a George Gershwin song. Join us next Friday. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and you've been listening to or watching Artsbeat.
Thank you.